Holy Gospel according to St. John, the first chapter.
Glory to you, O Lord.
There was a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to testify to the light, so that all might believe through him. He himself was not the light, but he came to testify to the light. This is the testimony given by John when the Jews sent priests and Levites from Jerusalem to ask him, "Who are you?" He confessed and did not deny it, but confessed, "I am not the Messiah." And they asked him, "What then? Are you Elijah?" He said, "I am not." "Are you the prophet?" He answered, "No." Then they said to him, "Who are you? Let us have an answer for those who sent us. What do you say about yourself?" He said, "I am the voice of one crying out in the wilderness, 'Make straight the way of the Lord,' as the prophet Isaiah said." Now they had been sent from the Pharisees. They asked him, "Why then are you baptizing, if you are neither the Messiah, nor Elijah, nor the prophet?" John answered them, "I baptize with water. Among you stands one whom you do not know, the one who is coming after me. I am not worthy to untie the thong of his sandal." This took place in Bethany across the Jordan, where John was baptizing. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ.
There was a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to testify to the light so that all might believe through him. He himself was not the light, but he came to testify to the light. This is the testimony given by John. He came as a witness to testify. These are words that probably conjure up very different thoughts and feelings depending on who we are and where our lives have taken us. For some, they are distinctly religious terms: witness, testify. But they are not religious words that are native to many who were raised in the religious culture of Western European Lutheranism. We don't often give a witness or testify to our religious experience, or at least we don't think of it in those terms. Perhaps the first thing many of us see when we hear words like witness and testify is a courtroom. Witnesses are called to speak to what they have seen and heard, to what they know. Maybe some are eyewitnesses, maybe some are expert witnesses, and they are asked questions with the purpose of revealing the truth. And a judge or jury sits above all these things that are spoken to discern what is true and what should happen next. Some of our relationships to courtrooms maybe don't extend very far beyond binge-watching Law and Order, but many of us do know rooms like that. Some of us have stood waiting while the power to shape our futures is in someone else's hands. Sometimes the results of those decisions have brought great joy. Sometimes they bring great sorrow and pain. Often I think they bring a combination of the two. Today at second service, we will get to offer a special blessing to the Kimball family at a milestone that they have celebrated this past week in Zayden's adoption. At the sound of a gavel, the beginning of a new chapter was declared for them this past week. And I saw on Facebook that it looks like Zayden even got to be the one to use the gavel. It was pretty cool. What does it mean then that John is called a witness and that he is here to offer testimony? What he must have witnessed must have been amazing, that his life became so fully and radically focused on preaching about the one who was coming after him, helping prepare the way for God's chosen. We hear a sliver of the testimony he brings in the verses we read today and in other verses in the opening chapter of John's Gospel. How did he come to know that Jesus is the true light, one so great that John isn't even worthy to take off his shoes. Where did he learn this title, Lamb of God, that he proclaims when Jesus is coming? And how did he understand that the Lamb comes with the power to take away the whole world's sins? How did he know that God's Spirit would go with this one everywhere he went, that he would be called the Son of God? However it is that he came to know these things, he was confident enough in this truth to tell it boldly no matter the cost. And that's a kind of amazing thing, because that's a thing about being a witness. It can come at a price. It can come at the price of simply not being believed. Sometimes it can even come at the price of safety. Some witnesses give up their whole lives as they know them in order to tell a truth that needs to be told. To testify can be costly. But sometimes something happens that is so important you can't not tell about it. I wonder what has happened in your life, what you have seen and heard that you just had to tell others. I am somewhat notorious for being an evangelist of certain things. My friends do not escape time spent with me without eventually being told of the glorious goodness of a few things that are a part of my life, perhaps foremost among them, how drinking black coffee with honey cuts the bitterness in a certain perfect way, or that yellow Red Bull actually is delicious, and that the store Anthropologie is a sort of alternate retail universe of beautiful things that sort of like makes my heart peaceful in a way that consumer culture doesn't feel like it should, but it still does. Now, I'm not called into this place or this moment in time to make disciples of Red Bull or coffee with honey or Anthro, so I won't go on about those things. But you can ask for corroborating testimony from my friends if you want, and you will hear how enthusiastic I am about all of them. It's easy, of course, to testify to things like these, because the cost of being rejected is fairly low. If you don't like my favorite drinks or stores, that's fine. You're welcome to be wrong, and I'm not going to feel very bad about it. But what about the things that have changed us, heart and soul? It's riskier to tell about that. Because if we aren't believed or embraced in sharing those things, it can be a rejection of our very selves. Whether or not what we have to tell is about something wonderful or something awful, when we offer up our testimony and feel like we are just being torn apart in cross-examination, we can feel reduced to nothing. This is why, or part of why maybe, the Silence Breakers, who were named Person of the Year by Time magazine, so deserve that honor. So many have risked so much to tell a story they know might not be believed, and often hasn't been for years upon years. It took 10 years after Tamara Burke created the Me Too hashtag before it went viral. So I wonder what John witnessed that made him ready to leave so much behind and to take a risk so great in order to tell about the one who was coming. And I wonder what you have witnessed that has changed the course of your life. I wonder, to what do you testify? To what will you testify? To what would you testify if you could trust that you would be believed? Even more than that, I find myself wondering today, what if we aren't only to be witnesses who testify, but witnesses to the testimony of others? When it comes to our testimony of how God has come into the world or our lives, sometimes our stories are quite different. Sometimes they even seem at odds with one another. And that's one thing about eyewitness testimony. It often varies greatly with the witnesses. The same witnesses will see very different things even when they are watching the same event. I suppose that's maybe why we have 4 different accounts of the life of Jesus in our Bibles instead of one. Those who spend more time in courtrooms than most of us do would probably tell us that witness accounts are notoriously unreliable or inconsistent or incomplete. What might this mean? for those of us who would seek to join John as witnesses to the one who is coming. And here I want to be clear that we should not confuse the testimony of third-party witnesses to the testimony of victims and people affected most directly by events. We do not always know fully what we have seen in all its detail, but we are all experts of our own experience and lives. We know our own stories, and no one gets to tell us otherwise. And when we are watching from a distance, when we have seen something just a ways off, it is also true that we may only have part of the story. So what if we were witnesses who are bold enough to tell what God has done for us, and also humble enough to know that our experiences of God can never contain the whole of who God is and what God does? What if we offered our witness in bold humility, and then honored the witness of others by trusting them too and seeking to hear them with compassion and loving curiosity? What if we worked together to weave a more complete image of the kingdom of heaven among all our testimony combined than we could possibly ever have from our witness just standing alone? Perhaps this is part of our Advent work, and it is far more complicated than I'm making it sound, because sometimes the witness of one can feel hurtful or wrong to another. Working that out in community is hard, and it takes a great deal of love and trust. But I think maybe this is part of our Advent work, to wait, to watch, and to witness to what we have seen and heard, and to receive the testimony of others who have heard and seen amazing things. Because we each have so much to teach and so much to learn when it comes to preparing for this thing that is about to happen in our midst, that turns the world upside down. So what have you witnessed of God at work in the world? What is your testimony? May you go forth this Advent emboldened to share it and secure in the love and trust of the God who has chosen to be revealed to you. Thanks be to God.